Huge thank you to all of the wonderful patrons of the Nerdy Narrative. Join now to support the channel and help pick the books that I review. Link in the description below. My favorite event of the year is currently underway here in Orlando at Universal Studios, Halloween Horror Nights. Longtime watchers of the channel know this is the time of year I get the least amount of reading done because I'm too busy spending 3 to 4 nights a week over at Universal, eating my way through all of the food booths, trying the specialty drinks, and of course, venturing through all 10 haunted house mazes repeatedly. This year, Universal really outdid themselves on some of the stories, and I got the inspiration of doing a book recommendation video that follows the theme of the house and its story, and that's how I arrived at today's video. If this video just so happens to be your introduction to my channel, something you'll learn very quickly about me is I'm a huge fan of slashers no matter what media I can get it in, whether it be a horror comic, horror books, or horror movies. So no big surprise that the house that inspired this video is a slasher story or Universal Studios take on a classic slasher story. So the very first house, which was created from the wonderful minds of those that work at Universal Studios, is Triplets of Terror. The tagline that accompanies this house on the Universal website is, "You're invited to the Barmy Triplets birthday celebration." But their kind of celebration involves recreating the murders of their entire family. As soon as you enter into the house, the very first facade you see is the outside of the Barmy family residence. The time is 1984. This is a family of hoarders. So the outside of the house reflects that. There's garbage everywhere. There's all kinds of items that are no longer of use stacked everywhere. When you enter into the home, you go immediately into the kitchen where the 9-year-old triplets are in process of killing their family. As you exit the kitchen, you enter into a hallway that is covered with maps, newspaper clippings. You hear crime scene podcast clips in the background. You see lines drawn on the different locations. And on the podcast, they're trying to determine who is committing these murders and why they only happen every 10 years. This is not the most terrifying house at Halloween Horror Nights this year, but in my opinion, it is the second scariest. And that's because all throughout this house, you're going through the different murder sprees that are happening every 10 years. All of the scare actors are the triplets committing these murders. All of their faces are covered with these creepy looking paper mache masks they had made when they were 9. The triplets are Junior, Harmony, and Melody. What makes Melody so scary is she always has this baseball bat with different things stuck in it that she's swinging. What makes Harmony so scary to me is her mask. She has this cute little pink dress on. Of course, it's got blood all over it. And she has this rabbit mask on. Junior is the scariest just for his size. They have these super large men who play this character in the houses, and he's so quiet. He just comes out of nowhere in this house and scares me every time. The last important thing to know about the Triplets of Terror house and its significance for how I chose the books that I recommend in this video is the number 3. The birthday of the triplets is March 3rd, 3-3. Fun fact, that's also my birthday. This is the 33rd year of Halloween Horror Nights, and the house number that the Barmy family lived in when the murders occurred was 3324. So Halloween Horror Nights 33 in 2024 could be one interpretation of it, or the 33 could mean March 3rd, 3-3 for the triplets' birthday. There's also the clever use of the number 3 all throughout the haunted house maze that you'll have fun looking for. Universal Studios just really does an amazing job. The creative team that's behind Halloween Horror Nights is just unbelievable. So in keeping with the importance of the number 3 for this house, I'm going to recommend to you 3 of my favorite trilogies that are about serial killers or slashers. As I introduce each of these trilogies, I'm only going to talk about the description for the first book in the trilogy so as to avoid any type of spoilers for the subsequent books. For those of you who have been around this channel for a while, as soon as I talked about this being a slasher recommendation video, I'm sure you saw my shirt and correctly guessed one of the trilogies that I'll be talking about here today, and you would be right. So the first trilogy I would recommend to those of you who have attended Halloween Horror Nights, you love the Triplets of Terror house. The Indian Lake Trilogy is one I think you would really enjoy. The Indian Lake Trilogy begins with My Heart is a Chainsaw. It takes place in Proof Rock, Idaho. Our main character is half Indian Jade Daniels. Jade considers herself an outcast in this small community. She's got an abusive father, an absent mother, and an entire town that basically wants nothing to do with her. And as such, she spends the majority of her time lost in her own little world. A world in which she has built a sort of protective barrier around herself from a very unexpected source. Horror movies. Not just any horror movie, more specifically the ones where a masked killer seeks revenge on the world that wronged him. One of my absolute favorite things about this book is it's narrated by Jade, and she is telling us, the readers, the history of this quirky little town called Proof Rock as if it is one of those slasher movies and the slasher is about to emerge at any moment. She even goes so far as to identify who the final girl is, and she gives you all of the rules of how a slasher film works because there's a formula to it. For those of you who are fans of slashers, you know what it is. You know they're predictable, you know they're campy. This leans into all of those vibes. And for those of you who haven't read a slasher and you're curious about it, you think you might want to enjoy it, this is the best recommendation as a starter slasher. There are intervals throughout this book called Slasher 101 where Jade is writing papers for her history teacher for extra credit, and they're called Slasher 101, where she's teaching him all about how slashers work and how it is that she's identifying all of the signs that a slasher is about to emerge in Proof Rock. When blood actually does begin to spill, I don't think anyone was more surprised than Jade herself. That's when it gets really interesting. We are pulled into the encyclopedia of masked murderers, horrors, and slashers that Jade has been consuming almost the entirety of her life. And she predicts the plot of exactly how it's going to end for Proof Rock. Remember how I mentioned earlier about slashers being formulaic? One of those things that you know if you're a fan of the genre is that they always come back. And that's how we have a trilogy. Sort of. There's a twist there, and you're just going to have to read it and discover it for yourself. If you would like a little bit more information about this trilogy, I do have a non-spoiler review about My Heart is a Chainsaw, which I will have linked in the description below so you can check that out. I would recommend just about everything Stephen Graham Jones has written. One for the Road is a standalone that just came out recently called I Was a Teenage Slasher. That is my brand new favorite by this author, so that's your one to take for the road. That's your bonus. Next, this trilogy falls into the crime fiction genre. It's by the king of horror himself, Stephen King. This is the Bill Hodges Trilogy, and it is my favorite bit of crime fiction that Stephen King has written to date. There are a few novels that Stephen King wrote later that tie into this trilogy. I'll have those down in the description box for your convenience. So that way, if this is the recommendation you end up taking from this video, you'll have all of the other books that tie into it. If you love audiobooks, Will Patton is the audiobook narrator for this trilogy, and he is wonderful. He also narrates the tie-ins, except for the very last one, but I actually would not recommend that you read that one. That's a story for another day. We won't talk about that one. I pretend like it doesn't happen. This trilogy gets its start in Mr. Mercedes. Every one of the books in this trilogy starts in the same place, but from a different perspective. Hundreds of men and women are lined up outside of a building that is going to be hosting a job fair. This takes place in that big crash where a lot of people have been laid off. Thousands of people are out of work. These people are cold, they're hungry, they've been standing in line for hours. Some of them even slept outside to try and get in line and get a job before they're all gone. Out of nowhere, this Mercedes comes flying into these people, kills 8, injures 15 others, and escapes. That's just the prologue. Chapter 1 picks up months later. We meet ex-detective, ex-cop Bill Hodges. Retirement is not doing him any favors. He's actually contemplating suicide, and he happens to look over and see a pile of mail, and he sees a weird letter that's addressed to him, opens it up, and it happens to be written to him from the Mercedes killer. This isn't anything Bill has not experienced in his line of work before, people claiming credit for murders, but there was just too many details that the killer put into this letter, and most especially the feeling that he wants something more. He wants to do something bigger. This threat, this feel of another impending attack snaps Bill out of his depression, his thoughts of suicide, and now he is back on the case, not in any official capacity, on his own, in an attempt to locate who this killer is, and more importantly, stopping them. Oh my gosh, this trilogy is so fast-paced. It's so full of suspense. It takes such an interesting turn, or several turns. It just keeps turning. Y'all know Stephen King. He never writes anything in a straight line. So for those of you out there who have only read Stephen King's horror and you thought that he was just a horror author, you're missing out if you haven't read his crime fiction yet. The third and final trilogy recommendation for this video is The Patience of a Dead Man by Michael Clarke. This is one of my absolute favorite trilogies of all time that involves not only a serial killer, but a haunted house. I can just, every time I think about this series, there's a scene in the first book. Tim hears footsteps on the stairs. He knows exactly how many steps there are. He's counting them coming up the stairs, and he knows there's one step left and they'll step onto the landing where he can see them because he's peeking out his door. Oh, my heart just races every time. I don't think I have ever been so creeped out by a book than I have in this one. My word. Unfortunately, I do not believe you can purchase it as a trilogy anymore. It's been reworked and it's going to be released in one tome. I will have it linked in the description below. But when I read it, it was a trilogy. I'm grateful to have this trilogy on my shelves in this format. Okay, so Tim Russell is our main character. He has a construction business that he's trying to rebuild after a horrible divorce from his wife. He's been on the search for the perfect property that he can, 1, afford with the money he has left, and 2, make enough money off of its sale in order to get his business back on a more stable foundation. Sounds reasonable. Sounds like a good plan, right? That takes a turn when he finds out this farmhouse that he's purchased is haunted. I don't know about you, but when I pick up a haunted house book, I really like for it to have some sort of truth to it. And what makes this so scary is the house that is described and featured in this trilogy, the author actually lived in when he was younger. You can see pictures of it. It wasn't haunted, though there is a room that's in a turret that's in this book that the author and his family could never access. They could never find the stairs or door to get into it, but this room had curtains in it. You could see it from outside the house. It starts with just hearing things, hearing what sounds like someone moving in the house, things moving, and then it happens when Tim actually sees the ghost of a little boy and his mother, who seems to be chasing the boy around the property. Unfortunately for Tim, he has been tricked, ended up starting a war with a scorned dead woman whose middle name is Vengeance, and leaving is not an option. I would absolutely recommend reading this story. The title for the new remastered version is called The Legend of Mildred Wells. It is coming out in October, I believe. Again, I will have it linked down in the description below. With The Patience of the Dead Man, that rounds out the 3 trilogies that I would recommend based on the Triplets of Terror House at Halloween Horror Nights 33 this year. I hope you enjoyed the video today, but more importantly, I hope that I was able to introduce you to one or more trilogies that sounds like something you would enjoy reading. If you like this video and you're excited about the other 9 houses and their book recommendations that'll be coming in the series, please consider giving this one a thumbs up on your way out today. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the other 9 houses. Have a fantastic rest of your day, and remember, a good book is always worth sharing. Thanks again to all the Nerdy Narrative patrons, with a special shout out to the Nerds Radiant tier: Chad, Mel, John, Gail, Amanda, Ashley, Star, Tara, Anne, Amanda, Andrew, Kate, Ev, and Sharon.